My husband, Julian, used to say that a great dish tells a story. He was right about that. For 5 years, the story he told the world was a beautiful lie, seasoned with a fake Italian accent and garnished with a photograph of a grandmother who wasn't his. The story was about a young boy learning the soulful rustic secrets of Tuscan cooking at his Nonna's knee. It was a story that sold out our restaurant, Nonna's Hearth, every single night. It was a story that got him magazine covers and fawning interviews. And it was a story that was about to make him a household name, thanks to the live television special he'd arranged for our 5th anniversary. The cameras were already set up, thick black cables snaking across the terracotta floor like sleeping pythons. The television lights made the copper pots hanging above the pass gleam with a theatrical, unreal brilliance. In a few hours, Julian would walk onto a custom-built set in the middle of our dining room and perform his favorite story for a national audience. He thought I would be where I always was, in the shadows, in the heat of the kitchen, silently plating the food that made him famous. He thought I'd be sweating over the osso buco he claimed was his Nonna's legacy, the one I had spent 6 months perfecting. He believed I'd be ensuring the risotto had the perfect, creamy consistency, a technique I'd learned not in Tuscany, but from a dog-eared French cookbook I'd owned since I was a teenager. He had no idea. He had no idea that the osso buco was not on the prep list. The risotto was nowhere to be found. In their place were the components of a story he had never heard. My story. Tonight, the world wouldn't be hearing about his mythical Nonna. They would be meeting me. My name is Sophie, and I am the true culinary genius of Nonna's Hearth, and this is the story of how I took my life back, one plate at a time. The moment the final thread of my patience snapped wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, pathetic little thing. It happened a week before the special was scheduled to air. Julian was on a local morning show, one of those aggressively cheerful programs filmed at the crack of dawn. I was watching on the small television in our office, sipping my coffee, going over invoices. Julian was in his element, his smile so wide and white it looked like it could bite. He was wearing his favorite cashmere sweater, the one that made his eyes look bluer. He was telling the story of our new seasonal special, a wild mushroom ragu with handmade pappardelle. My pappardelle. My ragu. A dish I had woken up at 3 in the morning to finish brainstorming, a dish born from a specific memory I had of walking in the woods with my own grandfather in Vermont. The host, a woman with lacquered blonde hair, leaned in, her expression one of rapt fascination. She asked him, "Julian, the depth of flavor is just incredible. It tastes like history. Where does a dish like this come from?" I watched him, and I saw the fractional, almost imperceptible pause as his brain searched for the right lie. He had a whole catalog of them. He smiled, a soft, nostalgic expression he'd perfected in front of the mirror. "It comes from my Nonna Elena," he said, his voice husky with fake emotion. "We used to go foraging for porcini mushrooms in the hills outside of Florence. She would carry this little wicker basket, and she taught me how to tell the good mushrooms from the poisonous ones. She always said, 'Giuliano, the earth gives you its secrets, you just have to know how to listen.' And that was it. That was the snap, because his grandmother's name wasn't Elena. It was Isabella, a stern, quiet woman I'd met twice before she passed away. She was from Naples, not Florence, and according to Julian's own mother, the woman's signature dish was boiling potatoes until they were gray. He had told the story of Nonna Isabella so many times that he'd grown bored of his own fiction. He'd become so careless in his performance that he'd forgotten the name of his main character. In that moment, watching him on that tiny screen, I didn't feel anger, I felt a cold, profound emptiness. He hadn't just stolen my work, my creativity, my life's passion. He had erased me so completely that he didn't even need me for the details anymore. He was improvising on a story that was my entire life, and he couldn't even be bothered to get the lies straight. The host cooed, the segment ended, and I just sat there in the silence of the office, the smell of bleach and old receipts in the air. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. At that moment, it was about survival. If I didn't do something, I was going to disappear completely. The silence that followed me home that afternoon was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Julian burst through the door. A few hours later, high on the adrenaline of local celebrity, he was beaming, holding a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers. "Soph, did you see it? They loved it. They absolutely loved the mushroom story." He didn't notice the look on my face. He never did. He was a man who lived his life on a stage of his own making, and the audience was the only thing he ever saw. I simply nodded. A slow, deliberate movement. "I saw it," I said. My voice flat. He didn't catch the tone. He was already moving on, pacing the living room, buzzing with energy. "This is perfect momentum for the special." The producer called. "They're thrilled. They think the Nonna angle is pure gold." He was a whirlwind of self-congratulation, and I was the still, quiet eye of his storm. For the first time, I saw him not as my husband, but as a stranger. A handsome, charming stranger who had built a palace on my back and was now complaining that I wasn't holding him up high enough for the world to see. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay in bed, feeling the weight of him beside me, the sound of his steady breathing, a rhythm that had once brought me comfort, but now felt like a theft of the very air in the room. My mind raced, tumbling back through the years, searching for the moment it had all gone wrong. Was it wrong from the start? I don't think so. I can't let myself believe that. When we met, it was electric. I was a line cook at a fine dining establishment in Charleston, fresh out of culinary school, full of ideas, but cripplingly shy. He was a server there, with a smile that could disarm armies and a charisma that filled every room he entered. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He would come back to the kitchen during lulls, leaning against the stainless steel counter, and he would watch me. He would ask me about my food, not just how I made it, but why. He listened. Or at least, I thought he did. The dream of a restaurant was born on a cheap bottle of wine on our tiny apartment balcony. "You're the talent, Sophie," he'd said, his hand covering mine. "You're a genius, but you hate the spotlight. I love it. I can sell anything. We'd be the perfect team." "Your hands," my voice. It sounded so romantic, so symbiotic, a perfect partnership. We pooled our savings. We took out a loan, his parents co-signed, which always hung over my head. We found a little space with good bones and a leaky roof. We painted the walls ourselves, our clothes splattered with terracotta and cream. It was our dream. It was ours. The lie started small. It was Julian's idea, of course. "People don't just buy food, Soph," he'd explained one night, gesturing with a breadstick. "They buy a story. Sophie, a girl from Vermont, cooks technically proficient food isn't a story. But Julian, a man channeling the love of his Italian grandmothers, that's a story. It's rustic, it's soulful, it's everything your food already is." I was hesitant. My own grandfather, the man who had actually taught me about food, was a French-Canadian carpenter who loved stews and pies. It felt like a betrayal of him. But Julian was so convincing. "It's just marketing, babe. It's a mask. Underneath, everyone will know it's you. I'll tell them." But he never did. The first time a food critic came in, she raved about the braised lamb shank. My lamb shank. The one I'd spent 3 weeks balancing the flavors of rosemary and orange zest on. The review came out, praising Julian's masterful touch, a clear inheritance from his Tuscan ancestors. I remember reading it, a knot tightening in my stomach. Julian had been ecstatic. He'd framed the article. When I'd tried to voice my discomfort, he'd waved it away. "It's for the restaurant, Sophie. It's for us. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? But I was beginning to feel like I was chained to the anchor. My flashbacks became a torrent, a highlight reel of my own erasure. I remembered the night we won a major citywide award for Best Italian. Julian went up on stage alone. He thanked his Nonna. He thanked his parents. He thanked our wonderful customers. He held the glass trophy aloft and smiled for the cameras. He didn't mention my name. When he came back to the table, he leaned in and whispered, "We did it, babe," as if that little word, "we," was enough to make up for the public omission. I felt sick. I saw every instance, every small cut, the solo research trips to Italy he took, paid for by the restaurant, while I stayed behind, running double shifts because a cook had called in sick. The time he agreed to a catering gig for 200 people without consulting me, leaving me and the team to scramble for 48 straight hours. He'd shown up for the last 2 hours of the event, accepted the applause, and told everyone how exhausted he was from the grueling prep. The most painful memory, the one that truly set the stage for my quiet rebellion, involved Marco. Marco was our sous chef, a young, hungry kid from Ecuador, with more raw talent than anyone I'd ever seen. He'd started as a dishwasher, and I'd taken him under my wing. He saw everything. He knew who was in the kitchen at 5 a.m., breaking down the veal. He knew who stayed until 2 a.m., experimenting with new pasta doughs. He knew who wrote the schedules, managed the inventory, and placated the angry produce supplier when Julian forgot to pay a bill. He idolized Julian at first, like everyone did. He bought into the story. One afternoon, I was showing Marco how to make a perfect saffron risotto, a notoriously finicky dish. It's all about technique, about the constant stirring, the slow addition of broth, the feel of the rice against the wooden spoon. It's a meditation. Julian was supposed to be in a meeting with our accountant, but he'd come back early. He floated into the kitchen, saw us bent over the stove, and clapped Marco on the back. "Ah, risotto, the heart of Italy," he boomed. He then proceeded to explain to Marco, and to me, the secret his Nonna had taught him. "You see, Marco, you must toast the rice until it smells like a summer field. Nonna always said it should sing to you." It was poetic nonsense. The real secret was temperature control and patience, things Julian possessed in zero quantity. I watched Marco's face. He looked at Julian, then at me, then at the risotto. He saw my hands guiding the spoon. He saw the concentration in my eyes, and in that moment, I saw the illusion shatter for him. He just nodded politely at Julian, and then looked at me with a new, profound understanding. He knew who the real chef was. Julian, oblivious, had floated away again, leaving the scent of his expensive cologne and his cheap lies behind him. Lying there in the dark, the montage of these memories playing on a loop, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. 2 days after the morning show fiasco, Julian had sat me down at the dining room table. He was holding 2 glasses of wine. He was in his big announcement mode. "Sophie," he began, his voice serious and full of manufactured gravity, "I've done it. I've booked us a live, 1-hour television special, national network. It's for the 5th anniversary. This is it, babe. This is the big one. This is what we've worked for." He was so proud, so blind. He slid a production schedule across the table, and there, in black and white, was the plan. Julian would be on set, cooking. My name was listed on a different page, under kitchen staff, a single-line item, Sophie Dubois, head of prep. I was to be in the back, out of sight, preparing his signature dishes, my dishes, so he could simply assemble them on camera and smile. He looked at me, expecting tears of joy, gratitude, something. He saw a face as still and cold as a marble slab. "All you have to do," he said, his voice softening, trying to be gentle, "is get the osso buco and the risotto ready. The classics. Nonna's best. Just make sure everything is perfect." He patted my hand. The casual condescension, The absolute certainty of my compliance was like a splash of ice water. He didn't see me as a partner. He didn't even see me as a person. I was an appliance. I was the high-end, reliable oven that produced perfect meals every time, and he was just angry when it didn't preheat fast enough. It was in that moment, with his patronizing touch on my skin, that the cold emptiness in my chest began to burn. It was a low, slow flame at first, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was going to grow into an inferno. It was no longer just about survival. He had made it about revenge, and I was going to serve it to him on a silver platter, in front of the entire world. The decision, once made, settled in me not like a storm, but like a profound and terrifying calm. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went into the office before anyone else arrived, and I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. It was a drawer Julian never looked in, filled with what he called my boring paperwork. In it, beneath old payroll stubs and supplier catalogs, was my arsenal. For years, without even consciously knowing why, I had documented everything. I had a stack of moleskine notebooks, their black covers worn soft at the edges. They were my real cookbooks. They didn't just contain recipes, they contained the entire life of my food. I opened one. The page was dated 3 years prior. August 14th. Idea for lamb shank. Remember Grandpa Dubois talking about braising with orange peels to cut the fat? Maybe with rosemary? First try too bitter. The pith is the enemy. I flipped a few pages. August 22nd. Try charring the orange first. Better. The smoke adds something. Needs an acid. Pomegranate molasses. And then, a month later, September 18th. Nailed it. Charred orange rosemary, a touch of star anise, and the molasses. The sauce is like velvet. Julian tried it, said it was nice as. These notebooks were my testimony. They were filled with my handwriting, with my thought process, with sauce stains and frantic late-night scribbles. There were hundreds of pages, a secret history of Nonna's hearth that proved the restaurant's soul was mine. But proof wasn't enough. Exposing a lie is one thing. Building a new truth is another. I didn't just want to tear Julian down. I wanted to build myself up. I wasn't going to serve his fraudulent menu. I was going to serve mine. The real one. A menu that had nothing to do with a mythical Tuscan grandmother. A menu that was about a girl from Vermont, with a French-Canadian heritage, who trained in classical French technique, and fell in love with the low-country ingredients of Charleston. It was a menu that was uniquely, unapologetically me. I spent the next 2 days in a creative fever, the likes of which I hadn't felt in years. The ideas that I had suppressed, the flavors I had set aside, because they didn't fit the Nonna narrative, came flooding back. Out went the heavy, rustic bolognese. In its place, I envisioned a dish of seared Carolina scallops, on a bed of celery root puree, with a brown butter vinaigrette, and toasted hazelnuts. It was delicate, sophisticated, and spoke of the coast we lived on. Out went the osso buco. In its place came a duck confit, the leg slow-cooked in its own fat, until the skin was shatteringly crisp, served with a sour cherry reduction, and wild rice pilaf. It was a nod to my French training, and my grandfather's love of game birds. For the finale, instead of a simple tiramisu, I would create a deconstructed lemon tart, a swirl of tart lemon curd, shards of buttery shortbread, dollops of torched meringue, and a sprinkle of fresh thyme. It was modern, it was surprising, it was me. Creating the menu was the easy part. The execution was the challenge. I couldn't do it alone. I needed an army. My first soldier was Elena. Elena was our head server, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with eyes that missed nothing. She'd been with us from the day we opened. She'd seen Julian take credit for my food for 5 years. She'd watched me shrink, and she'd watched him grow. I found her polishing wine glasses before service started, her movements economical and precise. My heart was hammering. This was the first test. If she said no, the whole plan would crumble. "Elena," I started, my voice barely a whisper. I need to talk to you. In the office. She followed me, her expression unreadable. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and I told her everything. The lie, the morning show, Julian getting his own grandmother's name wrong, the TV special, my name on the prep list. I ended by telling her my plan to replace the entire menu. I waited for her to tell me I was insane, that I was committing professional suicide. Instead, she was silent for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Well," she said, placing her polishing cloth on the desk, "it's about damn time." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I felt dizzy. She wasn't just on my side, she was ready for battle. "He's gotten lazy, Sophie," she continued, her voice low and conspiratorial. "He thinks we're all just part of the scenery. The front-of-house staff. They're loyal to the person who makes sure their paycheck's clear, and who treats them with respect. That's you, not him. What do you need from me?" Elena became my general. She would be my eyes and ears in the dining room, the one to manage the flow, the one to signal me if things went sideways. My next recruit was more complicated. It was Marco. His loyalty was the linchpin. The other line cooks followed his lead. If he stood with me, the kitchen was mine. If he stood with Julian, I was sunk. I knew he respected my cooking, but Julian had given him his first big break. Julian was the name, the power. I found him in the walk-in cooler, organizing microgreens. I didn't give him a long speech. I simply showed him. I had made a small test plate of the new scallop dish. I handed him the plate and a fork. "I want you to taste something," I said. He looked at the dish, his eyes widening slightly at the perfect sear on the scallops, the artful smear of puree. He took a bite. He closed his eyes. He chewed slowly, dissecting the flavors. He didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity. Then he opened his eyes and looked directly at me. "This isn't Nonna's food," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "It's mine." He put the fork down. "Julian is going to lose his mind." "I know. The TV crew is expecting risotto." He looked around the small, cold space of the walk-in, at the boxes of produce I had ordered, at the racks of meat I had butchered. He looked at me, and I saw the war in his eyes, the fear of betting on the wrong horse versus the desire to be part of something real, something authentic. "For 5 years," he said, more to himself than to me, "I have been cooking your food while he tells your stories. I am tired of the lies, chef." He straightened up, his shoulders squaring. "What are your orders, Chef Sophie?" The way he said it, with such formality and respect, was like a coronation. In that moment, in the cold humming silence of the walk-in cooler, the coup was complete. The kitchen was mine. With my army in place, I turned to my final weapon, the one I hadn't even realized I possessed until I started digging. It was the legal side of things, the boring paperwork Julian had always disdained. I called my father's old friend, a semi-retired lawyer named George, who had helped us set up the business entity, a limited liability company, all those years ago. I explained the situation, my voice trembling slightly over the phone. I expected sympathy, but I got something much better. I heard the sound of rustling papers on his end. "Sophie," he said, his voice crackling with a sudden energy. "Julian was in a big hurry when we signed these. He wanted to get to a meeting with a wine distributor. I don't think he read past the first page." George cleared his throat. "I insisted on a particular clause, for your protection. Your father was worried about this exact scenario. It's on page 12, Article 7, Section B. He read it aloud to me. "In the event of professional dissolution or significant creative dispute, all intellectual property, including but not limited to menus, recipes, and culinary concepts developed during the tenure of the partnership, shall remain the sole property of the designated culinary director." My breath caught in my throat. "George, who is the designated culinary director?" I whispered, afraid of the answer. "Well, you are, of course," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Julian is listed as managing partner. You are culinary director. It's right here. He signed it. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. It was my ace in the hole. It was my legal shield. I couldn't be fired. I couldn't be overruled. He had, in his haste and arrogance, signed away the very thing he claimed was his. He had handed me the keys to his kingdom, and never even realized it. The final piece of leverage came from the very people Julian thought he charmed, our suppliers. I had spent years building relationships with them. I knew the name of our farmer's daughter. I knew our fishmonger had a weakness for my brioche. I knew our cheesemaker was struggling to sell a new goat cheese that was sharp and funky and absolutely brilliant. Julian just sent them checks, often late. I sent them Christmas cards and visited their farms. For the special, I made my calls. I didn't just order ingredients, I called in favors, the most beautiful, exclusive peak season produce that money couldn't buy, a special batch of that wonderful funky goat cheese. A side of heritage pork, from a pig that had been raised on acorns and apples. These were ingredients Julian didn't know how to pronounce, let alone cook. My new menu was built around them. It was a menu only I could create, with ingredients only I could procure. The trap wasn't just set, it was baited with the finest food in the Carolinas. The week leading up to the live special was the strangest, most surreal week of my life. The restaurant was a hive of controlled chaos. Out in the dining room, it was Julian's world. A television crew swarmed the place, running cables, adjusting lights, and building a ridiculously pristine demonstration kitchen in the center of the room. It had a marble countertop and gleaming copper pans that had never touched a flame. Julian was in his glory. He was mic'd up from morning till night, laughing with the handsome producer, Damien, telling his Nonna stories to anyone who would listen, and practicing his charming, camera-ready smile in the reflection of every clean window. He was so caught up in the performance of being a chef that he never once set foot in his actual kitchen. He was a king admiring his castle, completely unaware that the foundations had been replaced beneath his feet. In the back, it was my world. A silent, disciplined revolution was underway. I had the kitchen staff running drills on the new dishes. There was a low hum of intense focus, the rhythmic chop of knives on boards, the sizzle of scallops hitting hot pans, the quiet instructions I gave to Marco and the other cooks. We were a well-oiled machine, moving with a shared secret purpose. The new prep lists were taped to the walls, the new ordering sheets were filed. We were erasing 5 years of culinary fiction and replacing it with a new truth. Every perfectly tourné potato, every clarified consommé was an act of defiance. The staff felt it. The air was electric with it. They moved with a new sense of pride, of ownership. They weren't just prepping food for a fraud. They were part of a secret, part of something real. They would glance over at me, a quick, knowing look in their eyes, and I would give a small, almost imperceptible nod. We were in this together. The first crack in Julian's perfect facade appeared 2 days before the show. He finally decided to grace the kitchen with his presence, striding in like a visiting monarch. He was followed by Damien, the producer, to whom he was giving the grand tour. And this, Julian announced with a magnificent sweep of his arm, is where the magic happens, the heart of Nonna's hearth. He was expecting to see the familiar sights and smells of his supposed heritage. Giant stockpots of simmering bolognese, trays of tiramisu setting in the cooler. Instead, he stopped dead in his tracks. His smile faltered. He saw Marco, his trusted sous chef, meticulously piping a celery root puree onto a plate. He saw another cook clarifying duck fat. He saw a tray of delicate leaf-shaped shortbread cookies that looked nothing like the rustic biscotti he was famous for. The air didn't smell of garlic and tomato. It smelled of brown butter and thyme. "What is this?" he asked, his voice losing its confident boom. The charm was gone, replaced by a note of genuine confusion. "Marco, what are you doing? Where's the prep for the show? Where's the osso buco?" Marco, bless his brave heart, didn't even flinch. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at me, standing by the pass, wiping down the stainless steel counter. I had prepared for this moment. I walked over, my movements calm and deliberate, and handed Julian a single sheet of paper. It was the new menu, printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock, the font elegant and clean. The anniversary special menu. I said, my voice even. He stared at it. His eyes scanned the words: seared Carolina scallops, duck confit with sour cherry reduction, deconstructed lemon meringue tart. A strange, strangled laugh escaped his lips. Okay, very funny stuff, he said, trying to regain his composure, trying to play it off as a joke for Damien's benefit. Seriously, this is hilarious. You almost got me. Now, where's the real menu? We're on a tight schedule. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze. I let the silence stretch, filling the space between us until it was thick and suffocating. I watched the blood drain from his face as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. He saw the seriousness in my eyes. He saw the entire kitchen staff, who had stopped what they were doing to watch this silent showdown. Their faces were neutral, but their loyalty was a palpable force in the room. This was not a joke. What do you think you're doing? He hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside, away from Damien's curious ears. This is sabotage. No, I said, pulling my arm free. This is my food. His face, a mask of confusion and rage, turned towards the staff. He decided to reassert his authority. He pointed a trembling finger at Marco. You, stop playing with that white paste. Start the bolognese, now. It was a direct order from the man whose name was on the sign. It was the ultimate test. Marco calmly set down his piping bag. He wiped his hands on his apron. He looked Julian directly in the eye. I'm sorry, chef, he said, his voice respectful but firm. My orders are from Chef Sophie. The use of my title, Chef Sophie, hung in the air like a guillotine. It was a declaration of allegiance. It was the moment Julian realized he was a king with no subjects. Damien, the producer, was looking back and forth between us, his expression a mixture of panic and pure, unadulterated fascination. He smelled a story, and it was 1,000 times better than the one about the fake Italian grandmother. Julian just stood there, his mouth slightly agape, the beautifully printed menu trembling in his hand. The magic had happened. All right, the magic of his entire world vanishing right before his eyes. The moment Damien tactfully excused himself, feigning a call he had to take, the dam of Julian's composure burst. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, and dragged me into the small, cluttered office. He slammed the door shut, the cheap wood rattling in its frame. The charming, charismatic television personality was gone. In his place was a cornered animal, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and genuine panic. Are you insane? He spat, his voice a low, strangled hiss. Have you completely lost your mind? A live national broadcast, Sophie. This is my name, my reputation, my entire career on the line, and you pull a stunt like this? He was pacing the tiny room, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time all day. You're trying to destroy me. After everything I've done for you, for us, I built this place. You built nothing, I said, my voice so quiet it seemed to suck the air out of the room. He stopped pacing and stared at me. It was the first time I had ever truly contradicted his version of reality, and the shock on his face was almost comical. I built this restaurant, Julian, I continued, the words coming out steady and strong, fueled by years of silent resentment. My hands, my recipes, my sweat. You just put your name on the door and told stories about it. His anger immediately curdled into a more manipulative tactic, pleading. He softened his expression, his eyes welling up with practiced tears. He reached for me, his hands now gentle. Sophie, honey, please, he whispered. Don't do this. Think about what we've built together. Our dream. You're not thinking clearly. The pressure is getting to you. Let's stop this. We can call it off. Say there was a gas leak. We'll get through this. It's you and me, remember? It was a masterful performance. He was playing the role of the concerned, loving husband, trying to coax his hysterical wife back from the brink. It might have worked 5 years ago. It might have even worked 1 year ago. But I was no longer a member of his audience. There's nothing to get through, Julian, I said, stepping back from his touch. The special is going on as planned, but it will be an honest one. Honest? He scoffed. The anger returning. You call this honest? Ambushing me? Humiliating me in front of my staff? In front of the television crew? You're trying to make me look like a fool. You don't need my help for that, I said. You can't name 3 ingredients in the duck confit. You don't know the temperature for the brown butter vinaigrette. You think a risotto sings to you. You're not a chef, Julian. You're an actor, and your show is closing. His face went white. He knew I was right. That was the most terrifying thing of all for him. His entire identity was a house of cards, and I was holding a fan. Seeing that his pleading and his anger were failing, he played his final card, the threat. This is my restaurant, he said, through gritted teeth. My name is on the lease. My name is on the LLC. You are an employee. I can fire you. I can fire all of them. I almost smiled. It was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment he would overplay his hand, so spectacularly. You should have read the fine print, Julian, I said calmly. I walked over to my filing cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a copy of our operating agreement. I opened it to page 12, and placed it on the desk in front of him. Article 7, Section B. All intellectual property shall remain the sole property of the designated culinary director. That's me. You can't fire me for cooking my own food in my own kitchen. In fact, if you try to force me to cook your fraudulent menu, you would be the one in breach of this agreement. He stared at the page, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. I watched the full weight of his colossal miscalculation land on him. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his power, that he had never even considered the possibility that I had any of my own. He sank into his desk chair, a deflated balloon of a man. His fight was gone. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a new, unfamiliar emotion, fear. He made one last desperate attempt. He stormed out of the office and into the kitchen, where the staff was now working with a quiet, furious intensity, pointedly ignoring him. All right, everyone. Listen up, he announced, his voice straining to sound authoritative. This is ridiculous. I will give a $1,000 bonus to every single one of you who walks out on her right now and helps me prep the real menu. He stood there, his checkbook metaphorically open, waiting for the stampede of loyalty. His money was supposed to buy. No one moved. The only sound was the sizzle of a pan and the gentle whisking of a vinaigrette. Then Elena walked in from the dining room, a tray of polished glasses in her hand. She set the tray down and looked at Julian, her expression withering. The front of house staff is ready for Chef Sophie's menu, she said, her voice carrying across the entire kitchen. We're excited to sell food we can actually be proud of. Then Marco, without turning around from his station, spoke. We only cook Chef Sophie's food, he said. One by one, the other cooks murmured their agreement. Yeah, we're with Sophie. Her food is better anyway. It was a mutiny, a quiet, total and complete mutiny. The restaurant family had made their choice. Julian stood alone in the center of the room. He thought he owned, rendered utterly powerless by the people he had considered to be nothing more than paid hands. He looked utterly hopelessly lost. In a final, pathetic act, he pulled out his phone. I heard him dialing, and then his voice, small and pleading. Mom, you need to talk to her. She's lost her mind. I could faintly hear his mother's tinny voice on the other end of the line. I couldn't make out the words, but I saw Julian flinch. He just listened for a moment, then said, "But it was our story." He listened again, then pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at it, his face a mask of disbelief. He had called for reinforcements, and even his own family had abandoned him to the truth he had created. The charade was over. The final hour before the broadcast was the calmest I had felt in 5 years. The chaotic energy of the television crew, the nervous tension of the producer, the palpable panic radiating from Julian, none of it touched me. I was in my element, a serene island in a sea of anxiety. I stood at the pass, the gleaming stainless steel counter that had been my stage and my prison, and I inspected every plate before it went out to the custom-built set. The seared scallops were a perfect golden brown, nestled in their bed of pale puree. The duck confit glistened under the heat lamps, its skin a delicate, crisp lacework. Everything was exactly as I had envisioned it. Marco and the team moved around me with a quiet, balletic grace. We didn't need to speak. We were communicating on a higher frequency, one built on shared respect and a love for the food itself. Out in the dining room, Julian was a ghost. They had wired him for sound and dusted his pale face with makeup, but it couldn't hide the terrified, hollow look in his eyes. He was pacing back and forth beside the set, looking at the teleprompter, which now contained descriptions of dishes he didn't understand. Damien, the producer, was trying to give him a pep talk, but his words were laced with the frantic energy of a man whose show was currently a speeding train with no driver. Damien had come to me just before we went live. "I don't know what's going on here, Sophie," he'd said, "but this is 10 times more interesting than the story we came here for. Just promise me you won't walk off. Whatever happens, we're rolling." I had just smiled and promised him a great show. Then the moment came. The floor manager counted down. "Live in 5, 4, 3, 2. The theme music swelled, a generic upbeat track that was completely at odds with the drama unfolding. The host, the same blonde woman from the morning show, smiled brightly into the camera. "Welcome back to Anniversary Eats. Tonight we are celebrating 5 incredible years of Charleston's most beloved Italian restaurant, Nonna's Hearth, with the man himself, the world-renowned chef Julian Dubois." The camera panned to Julian, who managed to produce a weak, trembling version of his signature smile. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. He walked onto the set and stood behind the pristine marble counter. The host gestured to the beautiful plate of scallops that a stagehand had placed in front of him. "So Julian," she chirped, "this is a new one for me. It's absolutely stunning. Tell us all about this incredible dish." Julian stared at the plate as if it were an alien artifact. He opened his mouth, but for a second, no sound came out. He was completely lost. "Yes," he finally stammered, his eyes darting towards the teleprompter for a lifeline. This is a dish, a very special dish." He was fumbling, grasping for a story that wasn't there. It's about the sea. My Nonna Elena. She loved the sea." The lie was so thin, so pathetic, it was painful to watch. The host's professional smile tightened. She knew this was a disaster, and that was my cue. As planned with Damien, I walked out from the swinging doors of the kitchen. I wasn't wearing my usual stained apron. I was wearing a brand new crisp white chef's coat, and over the pocket, in elegant blue script, was my name, Chef Sophie Dubois. I walked calmly, directly towards the set, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent dining room. The camera operator, sensing the shift, swung the main camera to follow me. Julian's head snapped up. When he saw me in my coat, walking into his spotlight, whatever little color was left in his face drained away. He looked utterly defeated. I didn't look at him. I walked right up to the host, smiled warmly, and extended my hand. "Hello," I said, my voice clear and confident. "I'm Sophie, and I'm so glad you like my dish." The host, a total professional, didn't miss a beat. She shook my hand, her eyes alight with the thrill of live, unscripted drama. "Sophie, what a wonderful surprise. "So this is your creation?" "Yes, it is," I said, turning to the camera. "To the national audience, this is a dish of seared Carolina scallops, with a celery root puree, and a brown butter vinaigrette. It's a celebration of the amazing seafood we have right here on our coast." I began to describe the dish, not with a fabricated story, but with the passion of its creator. I talked about how the sweetness of the scallop is balanced by the earthy celery root, how the nuttiness of the brown butter brings it all together. I spoke about our local fisherman, Captain Mike, who had brought the scallops in that morning. The host was enthralled, asking intelligent questions. The show had found its real star. I didn't just take the credit, I shared it. "Of course I couldn't do it without my incredible team," I said, looking directly into the camera. "My sous chef Marco, whose palate is as sharp as his knives, and our head of house, Elena, who leads our service staff with grace and precision every single night." I was rebuilding my restaurant, my life, right there on live television, not on a foundation of lies, but on a foundation of truth and respect. Julian just stood there, a few feet away, a forgotten prop on the set of his own life. The cameras had completely forgotten him. He was out of focus, a blurry figure in the background of my new reality. The host turned to me, her smile genuine now. "Well, Sophie Dubois," she said, "it seems the real story of this restaurant is even better than the one we thought we knew." I just smiled back. "I've always thought so," I said, "and it's a story that's just beginning." The aftermath was exactly what you might expect. The broadcast became an instant viral sensation. Food blogs and news outlets didn't talk about the restaurant's anniversary. They talked about the unveiling of Sophie Dubois. They called it the most compelling hour of food television ever produced. Our phone rang so incessantly, we had to hire an answering service. Reservations were booked solid for the next 6 months. They weren't coming for Nonna's hearth anymore. They were coming for Sophie's. We changed the sign a month later. Julian disappeared. I don't mean that metaphorically. He packed a bag the day after the special and left. I haven't seen or heard from him since. I heard through his mother, who called me once to apologize for not seeing it sooner, that he was staying somewhere in Florida, living off the money his parents had given him. The divorce was quiet and fast. Thanks to George and our ironclad operating agreement, there was nothing for him to contest. He had signed away his claim to the restaurant years ago. He just hadn't bothered to read the contract. The business, the recipes, the brand, they were all legally and morally mine, and what did it feel like? This grand victory. It wasn't the triumphant fist-pumping moment you see in movies. There was no giddy feeling of revenge. The dominant emotion, the one that washed over me in the quiet moments after the cameras stopped rolling, was relief. It was a profound, bone-deep, physical sensation, like a heavy, lead-lined coat I'd been wearing for 5 years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I could breathe again. The silence in my apartment was no longer heavy with unspoken resentment. It was peaceful. The kitchen was no longer a place I had to hide. It was my sanctuary and my stage. Looking back, I understand now that the lie wasn't just about a fake grandmother. It was a symptom of a much deeper problem. I had allowed my love for someone, and my own lack of confidence, to convince me that my voice wasn't worth hearing. I had made a small compromise at the beginning, telling myself it was for the good of us, but that one small compromise became 1,000. Each one chipped away a tiny piece of myself until I was almost gone. It wasn't just about the food, it was about my story, my identity, my name, and I had to stage a public coup on national television, just to be able to say it out loud. The truth is, Julian was never a monster. He was just a deeply insecure man who loved the spotlight more than he loved me. He built his confidence on my silence, and my silence was a choice I made every single day. The revenge wasn't on him, not really. The ultimate vindication was taking back the power I had given away. It was choosing to speak, to create, to stand in the light, and own my own brilliance. The restaurant is thriving. Marco is now my official chef de cuisine, and Elena is a full partner. We're a team, a real one. We're even talking about opening a second location, something small, a bistro, my concept, my menu, my name on the door from day one. So if you're watching this, and if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever let someone else tell your story for you, I want you to know that it is never too late to take the pen back. Your voice matters. Your story deserves to be told, in your own words. It might be the scariest thing you ever do, but it will also be the thing that sets you free. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to fight to be seen or heard. I read every single one, and if this story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories about finding your power. Believe me, it's the most delicious victory you'll ever taste.